Okay, well, it's kind of a cool and rainy Sunday morning here at Camp Crazy. It's just after 10 o'clock a.m. Rocky is having a sleep. He's on top of me, as you can see. My left leg's actually kind of asleep too now. He's heavy, he's a big boy. Oh, he's moving around here. Okay, I'm going to have to kind of... Oh, there we go. Okay. Rocky. I know, I'm sorry. Poor little guy. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Rocky. You're a good boy. I love you. Anyway, I got to tell you another wild story about another situation I got into with a female. Oh, there we go. There he is. um, this happened in my hometown when I had the apartment downtown. There was no parking where I lived, but what you could do is you could buy a parking permit from the municipality. It'd cost you around $50 a month. And they assigned you a parking space in a municipal parking lot close to where you lived. Anyway, I was told I was buying my permits to park, especially in the wintertime, because in the wintertime there was no on-street parking overnight because of snow removal and stuff. You get a big ticket for doing that, and they might even tow your car away, and then you'd have to pay to get it back, and it was a big deal. So in the wintertime, I would pay for a parking permit. Now, I had gotten myself a cell phone in 2015. It was the first cell phone I ever had, and I got onto the internet, but I didn't have internet in my apartment. I didn't want to pay for internet. And so what I used to do is I used to sometimes sit in my car and I'd use the town. The town had free Wi-Fi and the library had free Wi-Fi too. So I'd park and I would sit in my car and I'd go on Facebook and YouTube and stuff like that. Kind of fiddle around on the internet. And I might sit there for a couple hours sometimes on the internet before I would go inside. Anyway, go up to my apartment. Anyway, where the town assigned me to park was in a municipal parking lot, and I could get the Wi-Fi from the library there. And it was it was kind of right beside or across from sort of, it's hard to explain really, but there was a house there that was carved up into apartments. Landlords will buy a big old rambling house and they'll carve it up into a bunch of apartments. And that's what this house was like. And it was close to the parking lot. Anyway, one day in January, I'm outside brushing the snow off my car. There had been a huge snowstorm. And this woman comes out of the building of this house. And she just makes a beeline right for me. And she's got a determined look on her face. She's mad. And she starts going on asking me just what I think I'm doing parking there, and telling me that she thinks I'm a creep. She thinks that I'm stalking her. There was an old woman owned the house not too far away too. She said that the police think that I'm stalking that old woman so I can rape her. And the police also think I'm dealing drugs out of my car. And all this business. And then she told me that if I kept parking there, she was going to get her boyfriend, who is a police officer, to beat me up. And he's already agreed that he will beat me up and he'll see to it that I go to jail. Anyway, completely insane. I couldn't make head nor tail of it, But it ended up, I found out what it was, and it turns out I knew this woman years ago, but I didn't recognize her, because the last time I saw her, she was a little girl. She was the daughter of a man who owned a record store downtown, and I used to buy 45 RPM records. She was younger than I was. When I was like 18 years old, she might have been 11 or 12, and I do remember her because I knew her older sister. Her older sister was in my age range, and I knew her. And I knew the family well. I knew the father and the mother well. I often was in the store buying records. I remember one time I came into the store to buy some records, and used to buy the 45 RPM records. This is back in the mid-'80s. Buy them for like 99 cents a piece. And I came into the store to buy some records, and she came into the store. She'd only been about 11 years old. And as she went past me, I just nodded and said hello, and I kept looking up the records. And she head just spun around there, and she says, "Go fuck yourself," at the top of her lungs, and went straight to the back of the store. So that was my first interaction with her when she was a kid anyway, but I didn't know this was the same person because this was years and years later. This was like 2012 or 2013 or something. So I didn't know who it was anyway. Turns out, I found out who she was eventually. Turns out what was going on is she was a prostitute. And some of her clients were Ontario provincial police officers. And they were getting paranoid because they were thinking that I was watching the house and that I knew about their visits to the house to see her. Really, I didn't. I didn't even know that she lived in the house. I couldn't tell you who lived in that place, Only way I found out she lived in the house is because she came out and made all those accusations against me and informed me that she lived in the house. Anyway, after that, every time I saw her on the street, she was making threats, screaming at me, cussing me out, accusing me of all sorts of things, making threats. Now, one of the OPP officers who was her client, one of her clients, started following me around. This is the other thing. And I found out he was one of her clients because then I did start to pay attention to what went on at that house, and I saw him coming and going many times. Just in his regular clothes. He used to park his car away from there, not anywhere around there. And he was a married man. I knew who he was, and he was a married man. Now, he went to see a friend of what it was is there was an old woman I was doing some gardening for. I was doing gardening, and I was helping her around her house and stuff, and it was supposed to be a paid job, really, but her daughter controlled her money because she was starting to develop Alzheimer's disease, just in the early stages of it. And so her daughter controlled her money, and her daughter wasn't really big on paying me. But by the time I realized that the job wasn't going to pay, I had befriended the old lady, and I felt bad for her, so I'd still come and I would do a little bit of cleaning around up in her yard, and I'd do some gardening and stuff like that, Help her with some chores in the house if she needed something moved or whatever, lifted and moved or whatever, I'd do that for her. And so I got to be kind of a friend to this lady. Anyway, I found out one of her friends had been approached by this OPP officer and asked if me and her were involved sexually. So they were trying to make a case to say that I was sexually exploiting elderly women who had dementia. Basically, that's what they were doing. And the same with this accusation that I was wanting to rape an elderly woman who lived on the opposite side of the parking lot and stuff, And then the thing about dealing drugs was crazy, too. Nobody ever came to my car. If I was a drug dealer, I'd have starved to death. But they were claiming that I was dealing drugs out of my car and all that. That was another thing. But what was really happening is they were visiting this prostitute and availing themselves of her services, and they were paranoid, thinking that I knew. And the thing is, I didn't know anything. I was just on the internet, on Facebook, and watching YouTube videos and stuff like that. I wasn't stalking anybody. I wasn't doing anything like that. I just didn't want to pay for the internet, that's all. And I thought, why pay for the internet when I can sit in my car and get it for free? Plus, I was paying $50 a month to park in that space. So I thought, well, why the hell can't I sit in my car in the space that I'm paying $50 a month for, if I want to, and go on the internet? The town can damn well provide me with internet service then, while I'm paying them to park in this spot. Anyway, that's what it was. I ended up having all kinds of problems because of it. The guy followed me around and everything, it went on for a long time. And this woman, it turns out, she would run a scam, this prostitute. She would befriend elderly men. I found this out too. Because once you cross me, and I don't take an interest in anybody's business really until they cross me in some way. But then I'm really good at finding stuff out. I don't know, I could be a private investigator. I'm really good at finding stuff out. And if I take an interest in somebody's business, I'll find out a lot about them. And that's what happened anyway, is I found out that what she was doing is she was befriending elderly men. And she'd get into their house and everything, and she'd be helping them with little jobs in their house and stuff. And then what she'd do is she'd start asking them for money. And if she didn't get any money from them, she'd falsely accuse them of raping her. This was something that she was doing. There was one day, it was kind of comical actually. She was really loud. She talked really loud. She was downstairs on the other side of the street opposite to my apartment. There was a couple of pay telephones. She's on the payphone there making a date with a client. And she's telling him that he should pick her up at a corner on a side street. She said where, because she said, after all, we have to be discreet. Because, it's a small town and everything. In the meantime, she's talking loudly and calling them honey, and saying, now be sure to bring some toilet paper with you, honey, because we're going to make a big mess in your van, and all this business. And when you pick me up down on such and such a corner, because there isn't very much traffic down there, and we have to be discreet, because it's a small town and all this business. And she's making a date with the guy. Well, then another guy come along, and she hung up, and she seemed to know him, and she told him about how the agency had given that gentleman her number, and how she was going to meet him and have sex with him and all that. And very loudly talking. I could hear every word of it. I'm sitting in my apartment, and I can hear her talking just as clear. And this is with traffic. Lots of traffic, and I could still hear her over the traffic. That's how loud she was. So she was trying to be discreet anyway. A block from the main intersection of town, on a payphone, talking like that. Anyway, bottom line is, woman was squirrely as can be, I had a friend who lived in a house on Ottey Lake, it's called, which is a lake outside of Perth, Ontario. It's Ottey Lake. And it was kind of on a private laneway. There's a bunch of cottages down through there. Apparently one of his neighbors picked her up, met her at a bar and picked her up and took her home and had a one-night stand with her, and then couldn't get her out of his house. He actually had to have lawyers involved to get her out of his house, because she decided she was just going to take over his house. He couldn't get rid of her. So, I mean, this is the type of person she was. And I ended up having terrible problems with the OPP. All these weird accusations. It's probably still on file somewhere that I'm considered a guy who tries to have sex with elderly women with dementia and stalks elderly women to rape them and stuff. That's probably still somewhere on a file. There's nothing to that. I have no interest in elderly women, I mean, I'm at the point now where, other than a physical attraction, I don't have any interest in young women or women my age who aren't really young anymore, but aren't elderly either, So I definitely don't have any interest, physical or otherwise, in elderly women. But anyway, that's just another story and again, of a run-in with a woman that I had, and it was kind of stupid. I mean, I was on the internet. I was looking at Facebook and YouTube,